Hey everyone, welcome back to the low poly and unwrapping part. Let's open our original blockout max file. And if you remember, we had two folders for it. One was the ZBrush folder and the other one was basically the part where we were having all our elements not as a collapsed mesh. So this one here is the ZBrush part. Let's open the low poly folder. And this one is essentially the one that we're going to convert into our low poly. Let's also create a new high poly folder and then let's import our OBJ that we exported from ZBrush, the Mace_high poly. So let's import that. This might take a moment. After all, we have 2.3 million vertices and double the faces for that. So let's wait a second and here we go. And you can see how it comes in perfectly into place, exactly how we exported our original block out. So now let's also make sure to have a new save file for that. I'm gonna call it Mace_lowpoly_unwrap. And now that this is saved, we can start working on this. So let me close the low poly folder so that we're only looking here at our high poly. You can toggle the shaded view with F4 in between wireframe and the shaded view. And what we want to do is detach all these elements. First, let's make an editable poly out of it, which also might take a moment to load. And now it's done. So let's go over here to element mode. And it still seems to be lagging a bit. So now let's select this one spike here that we actually detailed out and let's detach it and let's give it a name already. Spike_high. And all the other spikes that don't have the details on them, we won't need them because this is the only piece that we're gonna bake and all the other pieces are gonna get the information from this one piece once we get to the normal map baking. So let me also detach that spike here on the top. And I'm just going to call it the same spike_top_high. And every time we detach something here on our high poly, it takes a while to load. This is normal. So don't think that it's your PC. It's just the way it is. Unless you have some super monster PC that handles all that without a problem. So now as we press Control, let's select all the pieces that we want to be the main body later once we get to the baking. So I'm gonna select these rings. Let's scroll down here and also select these pieces here. And then let's also take this one here. Essentially everything that is a part of this original bat, if you think of it like a baseball bat. And also this piece here, let's not forget that one that we had there in the center, right above that sphere. And now let's detach that and let's call it Mace_body_high. And then whenever this is done, we have the pieces there in the center and we also have the hand guard and the individual spike for the hand guard. So now this is also separated here. Then let's select this piece over here. Let's detach it and let's call it side_piece_high. And this is going to be the one that we're going to bake on later. So now let's scroll down. Let's select our hand guard. And then let's call it hand_guard_high. And once this is done, that leaves us only with this piece here. Let's detach it and call it spike underscore guard underscore high. And the other pieces are all over here now. And they're called group 28622. All we have to do is delete it. I mean, maybe they have a different name on your end, but so that they don't get confused later, let's just delete it, because this is all that we need for baking. So now let's jump back here to our low poly. So now let's open our low poly, and all these objects still have the turbo smooth and the chamfer modifier on. Let's delete that. So one by one, we're gonna get rid of it. And the reason is that these elements are pretty much already our low poly shape that follow exactly the high poly that we just imported. If you take a look at this here, it already wraps around it perfectly. So here in this case, I'm just gonna delete this one, and then later we can copy it back into place here once we are done optimizing this mesh. So let's just keep one for now. And let's carry on here. We got some optimization to do there at the handle. This is way too high poly right now, so we can definitely save some edges there. And I'm just gonna delete those and only leave this one here, because this is the one where on the high poly, if we re-enable it, we have our information. So this is the one that matters. Let's carry on. Let's delete the last two modifiers here from our objects. And now we have, oh, I forgot these spikes here as well. So let me just reopen the high poly to see where the one with the details is. And that means that essentially we only need to pay attention to this piece here on the low poly, because later we're just gonna copy them all back into place. So what I'm gonna do is remember the position of this one, press Alt to deselect it, and then also press Alt here on these other objects, and then we can delete that here. So we don't need these spikes. So we just want to make sure we don't get confused here and only keep those pieces that are relevant for us at the moment. Let's select this ring here, take it into isolation mode. Let's make a ring selection here on the inside and press delete. Later we're gonna weld that back on here. Or on a second thought, let's already do it now. We still have the edge information there, so all we had to do was make a ring selection, and now we can attach it here. Let's make a selection on these vertices and let's press the weld button. So now we have this as one piece. Let me take these rings here into isolation. And what I want to do is just make it obvious to you that this is still an instance. Let's collapse that down here to poly, and let's attach them all together here. So now obviously we have them as one element, and I'm gonna take it here into our wireframe view, double click these edges and control backspace them. And then let's go over here to compound objects and let's select our Pro Boolean. Let's say no edge removal. And here under parameters, we want it to be a union. Let's start picking and select this object. Let's get out of this mode. And then here, let's collapse it back to editable poly. And now we have some extra vertices that always happens when we do a Pro Boolean operation. Let's add a modifier, and it's called the turn to poly. You can see it already gets rid of it automatically. So all we have to do is collapse it. So that way this is merged. Let's go over here to vertice, select this, and let's just see if our vertice count is changing, and it's not. So that means everything is properly welded. We don't actually have to confirm it like I just did. I just wanted to double check that everything was done right by the Boolean operation. And now I want to press Control here on these edges, double click them with Control. And let's convert it here to a vertex selection. And then let's go over here to our scale mode and scale it down a bit here on the Z axis so that we have a bit of a bevel and not that perfectly sharp curve. Let's also do the same thing over here. And pretty much what that means is that later we can unwrap that as one piece. I mean, we'll see later once we get to the unwrap, but this just means that we can at least unwrap these metal rings as one piece and we don't have to extra split it up there. Otherwise, the normal map might get into some trouble if it's a perfect 90-degree angle. So let me just close this Scene Explorer. Or on a second thought, let's bring it back up and let's close our default folder where we had the reference image in, and we don't need that anymore. That was only for the block out. So now let's take these two objects here into isolation mode, this metal frame. And what I want to do is take this selection here and delete it. Then let's go to the left orthographic view and select these polygons here. All the way to that point down here. Let's press delete. And then do the same thing here from that side. Let's make a selection and press delete. So now we have it deleted on all sides because it also affects the other side. And now let's bring these vertex points down here with the edge mode. And then here on the y-axis, let's just sort of eyeball it, bring it down here to that point where we have this edge line from the other object. And speaking of the other object, let's select it. Let's take it into isolation mode. And then let's make a ring selection and let's delete all these polygons that we have here in the inside that we don't need. So I'm just gonna delete them one by one here, pressing Control, and also over here. So we just want to make sure we're not selecting something by accident here on the outside. And these parts here, also with these two polygons at the bottom, let's delete it. And then here, let's delete those. And now we have that pretty much all hollowed out and only the polygons here on the outside. Later, we're gonna delete these extra edges there at the bottom. For now, let's go back to that piece and then let's attach this here together. And now what I want to do is make a selection all the way here to the bottom. And on a second thought, let's Control backspace here on these edge loops before we do that. So let's Control backspace that. And now let's select everything here and then let's use our weld command, and I'm just going to zoom in here. So you can see that with 0.1 it's still not welded, and now it's snapped. So let's have it here at 0. You can see the difference. I'm just going to make it obvious. 0.47, and then let's just confirm that. So now one way to double check whether everything is welded properly is by using that border mode and trying to make a selection, and it says 0 edges found pretty much, because border mode will find open gaps, and if it doesn't find any, it means everything is welded. So I don't like how we don't have edges here, and I'm gonna use our slice plane. And I'm just going to position it here where we have these edges missing. as a loop, and then I'm just going to slice it. I'm just going to eyeball it. We could also use our snap, but let's just eyeball it and then say slice. So now we have these edge lines here. Let's go over to vertex and make a selection, and then let's weld it. And it actually does look like there are some points that we need to weld together. 0.01 is the threshold. And I also see we got some points there. Not sure exactly where they came from. Let's try our turn to poly. That gets rid of them. If I toggle that, you can see it. And then let's just collapse it down to editable poly. And now we have this piece here pretty much attached. And we can focus here on that grip part. So I want to be here in the left orthographic view, and I want to be in the edge mode. And I'm gonna select these edges here while pressing Control. And then let's go over here to collapse and collapse them down. And then let's go back here to our edge mode. And I want to double click these edges. These 4 edges, I want to make a deselection, if that word even exists, with Alt. And then Control Backspace to get rid of those edges there at the back. And then let's also press Control here on these edges, as well as these ones here. And let's also collapse it. And that way we already saved quite a few edges that don't really do anything there other than adding to our poly count. So now this is more optimized. Let's also attach this piece here to our main body. And we have the edges here on the inside that we need to get rid of. So let's take it here into the wireframe view. I'm gonna ring it and delete it on the inside. And these edges on the body itself, let's also delete them. And then all we have to do is attach and weld. And let's weld it here at 0.1. And then let's also take a look here at this piece where we're just gonna repeat that. Let's ring it, delete it. And then we still have these edge connections here in place from earlier from the block out. So we just delete it and then attach it back to the body here, this piece. And then let's weld it. So now I also want to attach our sphere that we have at the bottom. Let's go back to our compound objects. Let's put no edge removal, and we still have the union here in place. So let's just select this. And somehow it's loading here on my end, but it didn't crash. So now let's collapse the Provolene stack here so that we're back to editable poly. And now we have this problem again with these extra vertex points. Let's just add turn to poly and collapse it. And I'm gonna double click this edge flow that we have here. And I wanna open our high poly, go over to edge constraint mode, and then bring this down here, so that once again we can unwrap that as one piece and we don't have this 90-degree angle. So let's scroll up here and see where we can do more optimization. And let's select this piece here, this spike. And I want to take this edge loop that we have here and kind of bring it to the front and also push it up like that here with the scale tool. So that way we can unwrap that as one UV island there. And then let me select every second edge here, pressing Control. And then let's ring that. And now let's deselect everything there at the back and everything here at the front. Let's just collapse it. So now on our low poly, the top part is sort of flat if you look at it. Rotating it 180 degree will have a bit of a sharp angle here at the upper part, and I think that suits it better here on our low poly. Let's take this into isolation mode. Let's select that vertex and just press delete to get rid of this selection there at the end, which we don't need for our low poly at least. And then this edge loop, let's also control backspace it. So now we also have one of these elements here at the upper part. And this one, I just want it to remain as high poly as it is. I'm just gonna delete the bottom. But since this is sort of the dome, I'm gonna leave it like that, unless I change my mind later. But here, let's take these two elements also into isolation mode together. And then over here, let's use our Pro Boolean. No edge removal, and let's select that. Let's collapse it, and you already know the drill. Now we have these extra vertex points, and let's get rid of them with the turn to poly, and let's collapse it. So on a second thought, let's take these two into isolation. Let's use the border mode and cap this back on here, what we just deleted. And then let's also see about using Pro Boolean on that. So let's start picking, and then let's take a look. And you can see those edges don't add up. So I'm gonna undo this, collapse this back to an editable poly here. And pretty much what we did earlier. I'm gonna select that polygon, and I'm actually gonna take it up a bit here on the Z axis so that we save some texture space later on, and then delete that face there at the bottom. Sorry for the back and forth here on this. But now we can also have a look here at this piece. Let's get the high poly out of the way, and let's do the same thing that we did earlier at the upper spike. Let's select every second edge, and then let's ring it. And then let's be careful what we deselect here. I want to leave that big part here pretty much intact, but everything that's here at the front, I'm gonna collapse it. And this one here, we can also select the edge loop and control backspace. So then we have this piece optimized. Let's select our hand guard, go over to edge mode, and it still remembers this edge selection that we left it with earlier when we did the block out. And I want to chamfer this. So in case you don't have the edge selection, you see the ones that we are chamfering here. And that way we have a bit more of a nice bevel, and it's not so sharp. And I'm just going to use target weld here to connect these points together here. So let's take a quick look here at this piece once more. And right now it's sticking a bit too much in the low poly here. We have a bit of an intersection there. So I'm just gonna push it a bit out here on the Y and the Z. And let's also rotate it here back into the straight position, 15 degree. And I'm just gonna scale it out a bit more here on the Y axis, both the high poly and the low poly together. Now let's rotate it back 15 degree. And that way we don't have to face this weird intersection that we had here on the low poly. This way it looks all like it's properly supposed to be there, and it's not intersecting. So now let's also take this piece here and take care of it. First of all, I'm gonna have an edge selection. Let's bring up our connect dialog here, and let's have one line here going through it. Let's confirm this. And now let's chamfer this line here. And with this width, let's just select the inside and delete it, because that's going to be unnecessary texture space that we don't see. Let's go over here to our left orthographic view and use our slice plane here. Doesn't matter which side, but I'm just going to use the right side. So let's slice that, and then let's select all these parts here on the left side and let's delete it, because this part here is essentially what we're going to unwrap and then copy over to the other sides. And once again, so that we don't lose any texture space that would be unnecessary, let me select these polygons and I want to delete it so that we have an easier time optimizing this here on that side. Let's collapse these vertex points here. This one here as well. And we are not concerned at the moment about any missing pieces, in case you wonder why this is incomplete. This is now the low poly that we want to unwrap. So if you followed my earlier tutorials, you already know that I like to work with text tools. And I'm just going to show you where you can download it. Essentially, just go on that website. And then the installation, it already shows you exactly how it works. All you have to do is drag and drop the file that you download there into 3D Max and it will install. So now let's select everything on our low poly maze and let's click twice here on that checker pattern symbol or icon from text tools. Let's bring up our Unwrap UVW editor. If it doesn't open right away, you have to go on Open UV Editor. Let's actually collapse it back down and only select the main body here. Let's unwrap it one by one. If you use the editor the first time, then you will see this checker pattern, which you can disable here on that button. Make sure always bring up the edit window is enabled. And then under our preferences here, and here in the unwrap options, I want to have Show Image Alpha disabled. So then we can say save current settings as default. And next time you will launch the Unwrap editor, it will come up like this. So now let's go over to polygon selection. Let's draw a selection. Let me zoom in here at the top and also these ones here. I want to have together in that selection. And then all the way down here to that sphere. And now I want to press Alt and deselect those polygons. We can also draw a selection, which makes it easier because it also deselects it here on the other side. We don't have to do that twice then. We just got to be careful that we don't deselect something like I just did now, that we don't want to deselect. We just want to deselect these side pieces. And here in the front view, let's do the same thing. And now let's take a look at it here also from the left view. And let's get rid of these polygons here. So now we don't have these polygons here, and that's exactly what we want, because now we're gonna use our cylindrical unwrap. So here we have it, and you can see that green line here indicates where our edge seam is. And because we don't really see what's going on here in the unwrap editor, we are gonna click here on normalize map. So now we have to zoom out. So now let's rotate this. Let's press E. It's the same shortcut. So let's take our rotate tool and we want to rotate that 90 degree. And I'm gonna undo that because that didn't work, because I forgot to put angle snap on. So now if you look at the Z axis down there, we can rotate it perfectly at 90 degree. And this way the edge seam runs right through the center of that hand guard. That's where we want to have it. I mean, we could also have it on the other side, but we gotta put it somewhere. And at least the hand guard is hiding a part of it. So now you see that some of these edges here show green on the right side. And what we want to do is select the whole element here in that element mode. And then right click it and say weld selected. So now you see these green edges there disappeared in the UV editor. That means it's properly welded together. And now that I take a look, actually I was wrong. This line should be one line on the left next to it to be in the center. So let's select it again. And let's rotate it here by 5 degrees to the left. And now it's actually perfectly centered there where we have the handguard. It's running right through there, and let's weld it once more. And this means now we have this here unwrapped. Let's select the whole thing. And if you press Control, you can make a uniform scale. So let's just bring it down. I mean, later we're gonna repack everything anyway, which is an automated process, but just so that we see our checker pattern here when we bring it down. Next, let's select these rings that we have here, and then let's grow the selection. And now we can right click here and break it out of this unwrap that we just did. We want to separate those out and bake them individually. Let's also take this ring here on the top and let's grow the selection, and then let's break it out and also put it here to the other rings, even though we are not packing our UV map yet, but just so you know, to keep it sort of organized as we work on it. Now let's bring up our high poly, because I think that ring here, the third ring, is a little bit too flat there. So we might have to jump back into the editable poly mode here. Let's collapse our unwrap editor, and then let's select this edge loop here. And let me just use the move tool and then just bring it up a bit like this here. And then with our scale tool, let's also scale it in a bit. So this way that follows all more the original shape that we have on the high poly. Let me double click this edge and let's see if we should do something with it. But I think that's okay. So let's deselect our high poly folder and let's jump back into our unwrap action here. Now let us just select all this here and let me just put it to the side. This here is the body of the mace that we already started unwrapping. And now I just want to, here in the viewport, make a selection just for this part and also for this, and grow it. And then break it out here. So that way we have all these ring elements here as individual UV islands. And also this part here, we can leave it as one UV island. So let's separate out a few more elements here on this part. So what I want to do here on that piece is to have more UV islands here, individual for these pieces here on the inside. For that, I'm going to select everything and then press Alt to deselect those pieces that we don't need. And unfortunately, I can't be in the left orthographic view and just make a straight selection. So we have to do it manually here. On a second thought, I'm being silly. We don't have to do that because we can just press Alt here in the UV editor. I guess I was getting too caught up here in the viewport where we can save time here. And now we just break it out and push that to the side. And that way we have these as individual UV islands. And let's just take a look here at this piece, which I also want to break out. Otherwise the angle is a little bit too much on it. and this here looks better to be one UV island. So let's take a look here at this segment that we are zoomed in on the viewport. I'm gonna select these vertex points here and then just push it down a bit so that the checker pattern becomes more square. And then I'm gonna select these 5 vertex points here, and with our uniform scale, press Shift to kind of push them away from the other UV border that's next to it. That way we avoid any serious baking trouble there later. So next, let's select this grip part here. I'm just gonna select the whole UV island. And what we wanna do with that is to give it the quick peel. So take a look what it looks like now. And you will also see here our checker pattern, how it will be affected once we hit the quick peel. And what it does is that it relaxes everything as good as it can here. So this quick peel is something that we want to apply to pretty much all of our UV islands in order for them to be all relaxed. And we have to do the same thing here on these rings. So let's select them. Let me just go over here to our element mode so it's easier to select. And then let's hit that quick peel button on these guys as well. And now the only downside is that, as you can see, it doesn't get perfectly straightened. And that is something that we have some other tools for. So I'm gonna select this whole edge loop. Sorry, I'm in the element mode. Let me do that again without the element mode. Let's loop it. Press the mouse down on this button here, which allows us to align multiple edge loops at once. And then we're gonna do the same thing here, just with the vertical lines. So let's fasten that up. Let's press Ctrl on each one of these UV islands here. Then let's ring it. Then let's loop it. And then let's press that vertical align button. And then let's select an edge here that is horizontal on each one of these UV islands. And then we're gonna just repeat that process for the horizontal lines. So first of all, let's loop it, then let's ring it, and then let's align it. So that way we get that straightened out. I wish there was an easier way to do that. I mean, it still involves a bit of clicking around. I wish it would just come out like that by default, but that's just not how it is. Let's take that dome here. Let's grow the selection. And then what we can do with that is use our planar map. And it already came out the right way here. Now let's just quick peel that. And I'm still in the planar mode. We have to get out of that in order to move it then. So that way we already took care here of that UV island for the dome. And let's just see what we got here. These are the pieces that we were just unwrapping, the ring, the dome, and the handle. And one of these ring elements, this one here, I actually want this to be split up here. So let's break these segments. And then I'm gonna have to do the quick peel on it once more. So now let's zoom in on these UV islands. Let's go into edge mode and then select these edges. Let's loop them and then use this align feature. Just gonna double click that one, ring it, and do the same thing here vertically. So this is better here than to have it split up that way. And we can then put these UV islands here to the side. And let's take a look at these islands. Those would also require a quick peel just to make sure it's as good as it can be. And the upper ones, because they are perfectly vertical from its edge flow, are already aligned. This one here, which has a bit of a curvature on the 3D model, also needs that treatment here with the alignment. So let's put that also back up there. So one by one, we take care of our UV islands, make sure they are relaxed. These are the ones we got unwrapped. And this part here, let's select one polygon and then look at where it's getting highlighted here in the unwrap editor. Let's just make a selection on it, and I'm just going to use the planar button here. And now we have to split that somewhere. And I want it to split exactly where we have the edge seam on the main body, this one here. So let's select it and break it. And then let's use that straighten tool that we have here, followed by the custom relax. Let me select it and put it up here. And then what we have to do with that is make use again here of looping it and using that align feature. Let's double click that edge and repeat the process here. Ring it and align. So let's take a look at these 4 center pieces that we have pretty much here in the middle of the maze, these parts. And let's relax them, which is pretty much the same as the quick peel, but it keeps it all in place here and it doesn't reset it into the UV grid. And in that case, it's easier just to handle it like that here. And I just want to vertically align it. And then do the same thing here also for our horizontal lines. And that way we have these UV islands here also taken care of. And speaking of UV islands, let me just take everything that we have and sort of gather it up here. The parts that we already unwrapped. Just gonna scale that down here. None of that matters for our final texture. When it comes to the scaling, we're gonna use the rescale elements button later on. But for now, let's just take everything up here that we are working on and that we already finished pretty much. And now this piece here might also still need some work on it, because if we look at that checker pattern, it looks all weird and stretched here. So what I want to do is go over here and select all our vertices for this. And then let's use our relax tool so that we can ensure that everything is perfectly straightened out. The only problem is that now we want to also align our edges. So let's switch over to edge mode, double click this edge line here and straighten it. Then let's also double click these edges here, and I'm just gonna draw a selection for all these here, and then use that loop command and double click the rest of the vertical edges. So we are only focused on the vertical edges here for the moment. Let's double click that, and then let's make use here of this tool again, where we align our edges vertically. And I kind of missed that one here. Let's also align that individually. And then let's just take these loops here and do that horizontally. And just to demonstrate it, unfortunately, we can't use vertex mode here with this tool. It won't work. So what we have to do is make sure we are in edge mode. Double click all these edges here individually and zoom in. Double click to select a whole loop. Same as down here. Let's add it to our selection with Control. Double click. And now we can horizontally align it. So now let's carry on with the sphere that we have at the bottom. This one over here. And let's just select everything that we have here to see if we're missing anything. But this here is basically what we haven't unwrapped yet at all. So let's just make a selection for it. And then let's use that cylindrical unwrap here. We still have the normalize map on the right, so it comes out like that. Now let's just use our rotate tool and let's rotate it to where we have that seam here on the main body of the mace. So remember to put the angle snap on, and then there we go. This is how it should be broken up there. And then we can weld it. Remember, we have to always weld it when we do the cylindrical unwrap. Otherwise, the sides of it are always broken. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but that's just how it is with 3D Max. So now let's relax this. And now what we can do with that is, again, we loop it and then we use the vertical and the horizontal align, or in that case the other way around, horizontal and vertical. Let me just do that again. So now we got that piece unwrapped. We can leave that as one UV shell, and then we have the rest of the sphere here. Let's select it here from our orthographic view. I'm gonna have the back view in that case. So now I'm gonna select half of that, and let's just click twice here on the planar button. We could also use the quick planar, but that's essentially the same then. Use the quick peel to relax it. And now what I want to do with that, because we have pretty much unwrapped everything here, is that I want to delete the left side. I only want to keep half of it. I'm going to add our symmetry modifier. Let's take it here to our y-axis. As you can see, this is how it should come through here. So now if you look at that sphere, we have to flip it. And now we have the information here as we want it. I'm gonna disable weld seam. You can see the difference here when we have it welded and not welded. And then we can collapse it. Go over to our element mode. Select the left side and let's delete it, because essentially this here is all that we want to have, and then later we're gonna share the texture with the other side. So for now, let's see what we got left here. There were still these pieces, so now it's really easy. Let's take them, and what we can do with them is give them our quick peel. And let's just take a quick look. It seems like they came in sort of broken. So I'm gonna use the planar map. And now let's give it a quick peel, which means we have it now here in our UV canvas. Let's get out of the planar mode. I'm gonna select these islands here with our element mode and just use that rotate tool here to put them vertical. And now what I want to do is select 3 of them. Let's see which ones these are. Those are these 3 here. That leaves us with 1. And I'm gonna take that selection here and delete it in the viewport. And the reason for that is that I want to work on that particular UV island here and align it. And then we just copy it over to the other sides. And that way we don't have to align it for each one of them. So first I'm gonna use our align tool here with text tools. And then I'm just gonna take that vertex point at the bottom, and then let's select the 2 of them. So pretty much already align it manually. Now with the edge mode, let's select the whole loop. And then here, let's align it vertically. It doesn't matter which mode we use here, since we only have this one edge loop selected. Now I'm just gonna select these edges, deselect the one there at the bottom where we have the triangle, and also align it. And then let's just push it a little bit here to the left side. And I'm just gonna adjust it a bit more. This here looks about right on our checker pattern. And that means that this piece is now perfectly aligned here and won't consume up any UV space as before where we had it in this curvature. So now what we can do is detach that as a clone. Then let's get out of the polygon mode and select this clone. The pivot is still in the center here. So now what we can do is go over to our rotate tool. Let me undo that and put the angle snap on. And let's rotate it over here 60 degrees. And I still see some gaps, which means we have to target weld it back on. But for now, let's just clone the other parts also. I'm just gonna press Shift on the active selection and make another copy of it with just a 10-degree angle here. And then on that one here with another 60-degree angle. And yep, we have to do some target welding. I'm just gonna take this and flip it because the normals are actually showing on the other direction. You can see it because it's all dark. So now we actually have the polygons showing in the right direction here on these two. Now let's attach this. And also here and also there. So now let's go into the vertex mode. And we want to be in target weld. And then let's just target weld this manually. I'm just gonna have the wireframe view here, while 3D Max has a bit of a loading problem here. And let's take a look here on that side. This seems to have came out fine. These ones here, I have to target weld manually. And then the one here at the top. Now I will go over here, get out of the target weld mode and make a selection, bring up our weld dialog and weld together the rest of the vertex points there at the back. So that way we now have these UV islands here all perfectly straight. And right now it's only showing one of them. If we go over here to our element mode, we'll see that this is all four of them. This one here as well. So this is pretty much a more efficient UV island now. Like I said before, it's not curved. And that way, when we pack it later on, we get the maximum space out of it. So let's also take that piece here individually into our unwrap mode. And on a second thought, let's collapse it and let's make that more efficiently here, the way that we unwrap it. I'm gonna make a ring selection that goes all around it here in the center or on the sides, convert it to polygon. And then if we add our unwrap UVW and hit the planar button, then we get that already separated out here. Let's just push it to the side. And then let's collapse the unwrap editor, go over to polygon mode and make a click here in the viewport to deselect it, the active selection. Now, when we are going back here, we have this piece here as separate UV islands already, and all we have to do is hit the quick planar and the quick peel, or actually we could have just clicked the quick peel already, but now we have these pieces here already perfectly unwrapped. Let's just align them. hit that align button there with text tools. And now the sides of our hand guard are obviously still a little skewed. Let's get out of the Unwrap editor. Let's add our symmetry modifier and put it here to the Z axis. Disable weld seam and let's collapse it. And then we're also going to delete the left side, same as we did with the body of the mace. So now we can go back here into our Unwrap UVW editor. And let's select this piece here. Let's just give it another planar here. And then let's get out of the planar mode. What I want to do is use that straighten selection tool in combination here with our relax button. And it's a little messed up there looking. It's not always working fine with our relax. So I'm just going to go back to planar and give it a quick peel. Now let's try the straighten mode again. And then let's use our relax tool here to relax it even more. Let's get out of the planar. And then let's just double click these edges with control to have multiple edges here. And then let's use that horizontal align tool. And I'm just going to make a ring selection on these here. And let's also vertically align it. So sometimes we have to try different approaches to get the best result. Let's just collapse it. And let's carry on here with these spiky elements. And I already have a selection here active for this element. And that's perfect. I'm just going to use the quick planar. Let's also quick peel it. That way we have it perfectly stretched and relaxed. Let's take that piece here. So let's give this also the quick planar. And then let's switch over here to our edge mode and select these three edges. And then let's right click it, break it. Let's select that here in polygon mode and then quick peel it. So now we have this piece here. And let's go over here to our vertex mode. Select that vertex, press Ctrl to convert it to a polygon selection. Let's grow that selection. And then let's also use our quick planar followed by a quick peel. And then we have this piece over here. Let's also give it the quick planar. And then let's just take that edge over there. Let's break it. And then back in the polygon mode, let's give it our quick peel. And then let's go over here to our edge mode and let's align it. And also this piece here, I'm going to align it as well. And that leaves us with only that piece here, the top piece. Let's just give it the quick planar. Hidden down there. That's why I keep looking for it. And we're gonna rescale everything later and pack it. For now, let's just collapse our Unwrap editor. And then whenever 3D Max decides to be done loading, let's scroll up here. And let's take a look at that piece here. Let's add our Unwrap editor. And I'm just going to select all these polygons here at the center and give it our quick planar and then use the relax button. So now this piece, let's also give it our quick planar and then let's just align it. That already took care here of these elements. Let's collapse it. And now let's also take care of that piece over here. Let me go over here to our left orthographic view, zoom in, and pretty much like the piece that we just took care of at the bottom. I'm gonna have a selection for that. Give it our quick peel. Then let's select those polygons here. We have to then go over to edge mode and define where we want to have our edge seam. Then break it. And then we can just use our quick peel. And by the way, that piece here, I'm not gonna straighten it. I'm just gonna leave it like it is. All I wanna do is align it. If we would really straighten that, it would be too distorted there at the beginning, so it's okay to leave it like that. Let's also quick planar this top piece, and then we are left here with this one. Gonna quick planar it. And then let's define an edge here at the bottom where it's not so obvious. It's always good to hide things at the bottom. And let's quick peel it and just give it an align. So that leaves us with yet another spike that we have, which is the one at the top. And what I actually want to do before we unwrap it is bring up our Scene Explorer together with the high poly once more. And I want to go over here to this edge, make a loop selection, zoom in, and then with our scale tool and the move tool, where I bring it down a bit on the z-axis, give that a bit more of a curvature so that the normal map will look better. And also let's select one of these edges. Let's bring up our ribbon. And here under modeling, we have this feature where we can just auto select every second edge. Let's loop it. Let's deselect the ones at the bottom and then let's collapse it to save a few extra polys. Otherwise it might have been a bit too high poly there after all. And now we bring back up our unwrap editor. I'm gonna close the ribbon, don't need it at the moment. And let's start here by that top piece, quick planar. And I'm gonna relax it. Let's also take that piece here and let's give it our quick planar. And then let's just take any of these edges here really. We can't really hide the edge seam there at the top part anyway, so it doesn't matter where we have it. And then let's align it, this UV island. And that piece here at the bottom, let's select it. Let's grow the selection. That's why I gave it that extra curvature, because it's not a perfect 90-degree angle. And this way we get away by having it as one UV island. Let's use that straighten tool in combination with the relax, which even worked quite good. It's sometimes hit and miss with that straighten tool. Now let me just loop that selection and then let's make use here of this vertical align tool for all of them. And the same here on the vertical ones. Let's get that out of the way, and that leaves us with that piece. A simple quick planar followed by relax. Or you could also use the quick peel, but both work fine. Let's collapse it. So now we have unwrapped all our pieces. And that means that it's time to select everything. Let's bring up our unwrap editor. And one thing I want to show you, if we select everything now, where we have it as separated pieces, and we hit that rescale elements button, you will see how that didn't really rescale them. So it only rescaled them for each individual element, but we want it to be universal for all of them. So with that selection active, we have to go over here and collapse it down to one mesh, which we then convert to editable poly. So now, that being one object here, we can then take everything again. You can also press Ctrl A to make sure you get all the UV islands. And now if we use our rescale element button, you see that this is all the same size as it should be, and we use our pack custom button here. So that usually is a good base, but let's go on these extra options that we have. If we press the mouse down here on that packing icon, we get a second option. Let's bring it up. I'm gonna change this here to fill holes and add a 2 here on the end. That way we have more of a width here in between our UV islands. And that looks better already. I'm still not happy though with it. I'm gonna have to do some manual work now. I usually always do that. I use the auto packing. And then I'm doing some custom packing work here to make sure it's as good as it can be. So let's take a look. We don't need to change everything, but a few things, like for example this tiny thing here, let's just make sure it's not so close there to the border of our UV grid. Let's take that piece here and rearrange it a bit. I mean, we got all the space there, so we may as well make sure that it's not so close by each other, which also then makes it easier for us once we get to the texturing. Same as here. No need to have these UV islands so close by each other. I'm just gonna give that here the relax and use our rotation tool to make it a bit more aligned there to the top. And I just hit the wrong button here on that piece. I'm also gonna relax that piece a bit more and then put it down here. Same here. Let's also use our relax. I forgot to relax these pieces earlier, which is why I'm doing it now. So now let's bring that here a bit down. Like I said, I always try to avoid having things too close there to the edges of our UV sheet. This here was the sphere. I was just giving it a bit of an extra relax. So let's select everything. And you can see that we can still have a bit of space here on the top. I'm just gonna push everything up a bit without it being outside of our UV grid. And then that piece over here, I'm just gonna put it here in one of these open gaps that we have there. And that piece here, let's rotate it 90 degrees and let's also add it here. We got a bit more space left there, so we may as well have these pieces in there. Let's put that here a bit to the right side. And let me go back in the element mode so that it's easier to select it. And this piece here, let's push it a bit to the right side. This one over here. So basically we're just making a bit of room for us here so that once we are in Substance Painter, it's easier for us in case we have to go into the 2D view and do some painting there. That way it's not so crowded. And this is basically the part that matters when we do this custom packing here. So I was just pushing these two here to the side. And other than that, let's have a quick look around. I think this is pretty much it. So now we have to collapse our UV editor, and then we gotta make sure that we have all our other parts back in place. And first of all, I'm gonna take care of our naming convention, since we were basically just attaching everything back together. Now let's take that body and I'm just gonna paste it here from the high poly and then change it to _low at the back. This one here was our side _piece_high. So we're gonna call it the same, just _low. And then here, this one was the spike _high. So we call it the same, just with low. And then this one here was spike top. I'm just gonna type it out here for that one. So 2 pieces left. This one was our hand _guard _low. And this is just the naming convention that we have to put here so that Substance Painter will read it once we get to our baking. Spike _guard _low. So now we have the right naming convention, and it's time to put the pieces back into place where they belong. I'm gonna start here with that element. I'm gonna detach it out here as a clone. Let's select that clone. It might not look like it was selected, but it actually is. So let me just mirror that here on the x-axis. Make sure to say no clone when you mirror it, because we already detached it as a clone. And then on the unwrap editor, it's very important that now we take that piece here, say 1 where it says V, press enter to push it out here by a power of 1, so that our textures won't get a problem once we bake it. Now let's attach it back to the main piece and weld it together. So that involves a lot of jumping in and out of the unwrap editor. I'm also gonna use smoothing groups from UV shells here on our object through that tools dialog in the text tools. That is essential for the normal maps to bake the right way. Let me undo that. Let's put angle snap back on and then press shift with a 90-degree angle here. And I'm gonna carry on doing the same here over to that side. And also over here. So these are our 3 copies. Let's confirm that one. You can see it in the Scene Explorer. They all are called 001, 002, and so on. Let's select them, bring up the unwrap editor, and also push them out of the way by 1. Let's collapse it. That way we guarantee our normal map won't have any trouble. Now let's also use the mirror command. In that case, I'm just going to use mirror and copy. And then with the active selection of our copy, we do the same thing where we open the unwrap editor and push it up here by 1. So now let's attach it back to our main piece so that it's called Mace body _low still. Let's select everything. And then let's use our weld command here, 0.01. I'm just making sure that nothing gets welded that's not supposed to be welded by making that threshold smaller. Let's bring up the material editor. Let's select everything and assign a material to it called Mace. And I'm just gonna increase the specular level so that you can see the difference here once we run that smoothing group from UV shell command on it. Now you see that all these UV islands that we have separated are looking different as before. That means it worked, and it looks strange here, but it's gonna be all good later on. It's necessary to have the best normal map, and I'm doing the same thing here on the rest of the objects. Let's make sure that every object has this treatment here of smoothing groups from UV shells. This one here as well, our handguard. Collapse it back down, and then this piece here as well. collapse. And now let's go back to our top perspective, and we're gonna repeat what we were doing in the block out part. We go over here to array. Let's put the preview on, and let's put it to 7. And then let's rotate that over here. And then we just have to confirm and delete the currently active selection because that's a duplicate. So let's press the delete button. And that way we have all these objects now. We just want to make sure that we select everything aside from the original one. All these copies, as you can see here in the Scene Explorer. And we want to also push it out of the way. So now we only have the UV information there on that original piece. Let's just close everything. It's a bit cluttered here. Oops. Just gonna leave the Scene Explorer open. And now let me bring up our high poly, because I need to see where these pieces need to go. We have some high poly information there that gives it away. As we select them all, press Shift to make a copy, and we just want to make sure that it's where we have these holes on the high poly. Let me just select the body and put it on Alt X here in transparency mode so that we see that better. Let's make a selection back here for these pieces. Pressing Alt to deselect the selected pieces that we don't need. And then let's just press the Shift button here as we drag that down on the Y-axis so that we also have the information down here. And by information, I actually mean these pieces. So let me make a selection once again here. Pressing Alt to deselect what we don't need. And then let's bring up the Unwrap editor. Select all that and also push it out of the way here by 1. So now let's collapse the UV editor. And I'm just gonna expand the Scene Explorer. So let's select everything here in the Scene Explorer that has these numbers. That means we have them as the copies. And as we can see here, everything is out of the UV canvas as it should be. Now let's go over here and let's collapse that down to one element. And I'm just going to call it spikes. That won't have any effect then on our baking, but it will still show the normal map information after the bake. That's exactly what we want. So we still have this one spike left here that we need to copy 3 times. I'm gonna switch over to Effect Pivot, center it to the object, get out of that mode. That way we can then copy it here, pressing Shift. And then let's just rotate it here 15 degrees. We don't really need to look at the high poly for that. Let's also copy that piece over here. We are just making sure that these copied pieces are looking good the way we position them here. I have the angle snap on and work with rotate to make sure they are evenly spread out and rotated here. So now we just have to double check this one here on the left view. I want it to be a bit further down here. And now let's select these 3 copies. And also we have to then select everything for them and push them out of the way by 1. Let's collapse it. Let me just bring up the high poly once more. Just want to double check that everything looks fine here. And yes, it does. So let's close the high poly and let's select our hand guard. And the pivot is all the way up there. So I'm just going to go here to the Effect Pivot mode. Say Effect Pivot only and push it down here on the Z axis. Let's go over here to our back view and use the mirror. And we want to copy it on the x-axis. So this is the last piece where we also have to bring up the UV editor and then push it out of the way by 1. Let's collapse that back down, and then let's select the original piece and attach the copied piece back on it. Let's select everything and let's weld it. So now this piece here is taken care of. We just need to also make sure that the smoothing groups from UV shells is applied. So let's collapse that. And on our Scene Explorer, there is one piece where I'm not sure where it's coming from. If you look at it, it says cylinder 049. Let's select it. And it turns out to be an empty piece. We can just press the delete button on it. So I made a test bake and I ran into some trouble, as you can see here on that picture. And that means that we have to go back here to the body. And while being in edge mode, let's select these 3. Let's bring it. Let's convert it to poly. And then grow the selection. And then say detach on that. And I'm gonna call it rings_low. And then what we have to do is go over here to our high poly. And we also have to separate out these rings here. Let's go to the element mode. And once again, this is being slow. We're just pressing Control to make a selection of multiple elements and then detach them out as rings_high, which will then be one object here. So here we have it. And now we are ready to export. And while we are here in our high poly, I'm just gonna hit the export selected button. I'm gonna navigate over here to my substance folder within my Mace folder, and I wanna have it as an OBJ. Some people like to have FBX, but I'm just gonna use it here as an OBJ and export that. I'm actually getting quite a lot of slack from some people because I'm always using OBJ as high poly, but it works for me. So here we have the low poly, and I'm gonna say the same thing, export selected, and the low poly I definitely want it to be an FBX, Mace_low FBX. And that's it. Let's do some awesome texturing in Substance Painter. See you there.